guys, Dr. Tiff here. Want to talk to you today about building a meal. And I think that whenever somebody starts a new plan, a program, there's almost an assumption that it's going to be a struggle, that there's going to be all this finagling and planning and prepping. And to some level, especially with the meticulousness of what we're trying to accomplish at Studio 2, there is a lot of forethought and planning and preparation that goes into being successful. That's just the nature of any type of fat loss program, even if you're trying to look at it from a long-term sustainable approach. You still have to understand, you have to educate yourself, you have to learn how to plan according to your schedule and be strategic. But I think there's just some really quick comparisons and some quick guidelines that I can provide to you that'll make this process a lot easier, because I just think about, how do I do this through the day? What is it that for me has really helped to navigate a day without having to spend hours and hours going through a database to figure out what fits where? And what I've recognized over the last however many years that I've been doing this is that there's some pretty consistent comparisons amongst carb sources and protein sources where it's almost a this for that. And when I go to the grocery store now, I can just know that I can put certain things together in different combinations and I'm going to get the pretty close to the same output in terms of the macro breakdown. And I think if you can really learn those specific tools and those specific changes that you can make in a given week, it'll make meal planning a lot easier, because you're just trading one protein for the other. And in terms of serving sizes and finagling, there won't be a lot of difference there, except in some cases, which we'll go through. So I've got my trusty whiteboard here. Stu and I love this little tool. But I'm calling it Build a Meal. I've never been to Build-A-Bear, but I guess you could compare it to that. Basically taking various components and putting them together to create a final product. And I've just outlined carbs and proteins here, and the reason for that is because fats tend to simply be an element of your protein or the cooking process that you're using. Little peripherals like cheeses or avocados or olive oils or dressings that you're adding to your meal. So we don't necessarily have to pick a fat that we're going to add. It's usually just incorporated into the meal itself, and you can assume such and log it and kind of see where you're falling if you need to add additional condiments and things to get your fat in for the day. So you see here on our carb list, and I've given you some specific portions and also whether it's cooked or dry, because this is something I point out to a lot of people on food journals when they're logging, to make sure they log it the way they weigh it or measure it. So the same goes with meat. If you're cooking it and then weighing it, you need to make sure you log it as the cooked weight. Because, for example, if I eat 4 ounces of raw chicken, not that I would eat raw chicken, but you know what I mean, if I weigh it and assume the raw weight, once I cook it, it's only going to be about 2 ounces because it loses so much water. So if I put in that I ate 3 ounces of chicken and it was 3 ounces cooked, then that's actually about 4 ounces raw. So the protein and fat content will change, not maybe significantly, but enough to throw some of your numbers off for the day. So if you weigh it raw, log an entry that says chicken raw or ground turkey raw. If you weigh it after you cook it, make sure you enter the cooked entry so that it accurately reflects your protein and or your carbs. So the same will go for an oatmeal or a rice or a pasta. What are you weighing it before you cook it, or are you weighing it after you cook it? So for example, 1 cup of cooked quinoa, cooked rice, cooked barley, cooked beans are going to have about 35 to 40 grams of carbs. The minimal variation there is not enough to really worry about, again, unless you're going into a competition and every tiny little gram matters. But at Studio 2, we're mostly just looking at broad stroke changes, good, healthy, habitual changes. So if you're looking at aiming for about 35 to 40 carbs in a meal as your main carb source, because you're always going to have some added carbs in your veggies or your fruit. You're going to have some added carbs in sauces or condiments. You're going to potentially have some added carbs in the drink that you choose to have with your meal. So if you can minimize or not minimize, but target a certain number of carbs as your main starch, then you know you're going to be up around that 45 to 50 carbs a day, and some of you may need less than that. So this is just sort of a snapshot. But 35 to 40 carbs in a cup of rice, barley, quinoa, or beans. 2 ounces of dry pasta, 35 to 40 carbs. Okay? 3/4 of a cup of dry oats, 35 to 40 carbs. A 7-inch ultra thin crust, and I've done a video on these pizzas, but there could be different variations, but the Mama Mary's in particular, 40 carbs in that ultra thin individual crust pizza. 35 to 40 carbs in a burrito size whole wheat or flour tortilla. 35 to 40 carbs in 20 oven-baked fries, Ore-Ida, Alexia, any of those that you buy in the freezer section. What's going to vary on some of these down here would be fat content. Right? 2 slices of hearty whole grain or white bread is going to be about 35 to 40 carbs. So in any of your grains up here, you're going to get minimal fat. Potatoes, pasta, rice, quinoa. There's not a lot of added fats there. Once you get into some of the processed products, just watch how it impacts your fat content. But from a strict carb counting standpoint, all these are comparable. So if you think about a meal, you know you can pick and switch out any of those things, and you're going to get about 35 to 40 grams of carbs. So it's really pretty simple in the week. You know, what I do is I think, what are my 5 or 6 starches for the week? Okay, I've got polenta, I've got beans, I've got quinoa. One night we'll do wraps. One night maybe we'll make tacos with tortillas. So I know all those are going to be about 35 to 40 carbs, and then I can add or tweak if needed. If I want to have a glass of wine, then I might only have half of my pizza, so that I leave room for 25 or 30 carbs for my wine. So again, tweaking your portions, but from a base standpoint, you can mix and match those and it'll come out in about the same place. The same is true for protein. Most protein has 7 to 8 grams of protein per ounce. Okay, 7 to 8 grams of protein per ounce. So in 4 ounces, you're going to get 28 to 30 grams of protein. Again, what will vary is the fat content, right? Your ground beefs, your steaks, even, you know, your tenderloin, if you don't get extra lean, might add a little more fat than will a chicken breast or the 99% lean ground turkey or chicken, tuna, things that are very minimal in terms of how they impact your fats. But from a strictly a protein standpoint, you're looking at 7 to 8 grams per ounce. And again, be careful on how you log it. Okay, once you cook it, and beef tends to lose a little less water because you don't eat it as well done as a piece of chicken or a turkey or a pork. On a steak, the raw and cooked weight might not be quite as different, but still just make sure you log it the way that you measure it. If you don't find the entry on MyFitnessPal, use CalorieKing.com. It's a great resource, and it has a lot more raw versus cooked options, so you can pick exactly what you used and enter that value. You know, one thing I didn't mention over here was potatoes. They change a lot. It's about 200 grams of raw potato, 175 grams of raw potato is going to be about 40 carbs. So again, that would be another option there. But what I'm saying is, when you plan your meals, if you go to the grocery and you get 4 or 5 proteins and you get 4 or 5 starches, you compare and mix and match and come out in about the same place. 40 to 45 carbs, or excuse me, 35 to 40 carbs and 30 to 35 protein. And again, that doesn't mean that's what you're aiming for, but that's sort of your base template. And then you can adjust your portions a little bit. But also know, these are just the mains, right? The breads and everything, those will have a little protein. If you add cheese, it's going to add a little fat and a little protein. So don't forget, when you're making a meal, you might only have 4 ounces of chicken there, but if you add some cheese to it and you put it in a wrap, and even sometimes you put a condiment on it, all those things are going to add additional protein. So before you know it, you could be up around 35 protein just in your meat or your animal protein, but then you've got 8 or 10 more grams in everything you're putting with it. So before you know it, you could be overshooting. So hope this was helpful in terms of just being able to build a meal and have some quick, easy mix and matches, and know that you're going to come out in about the same spot. So go build a meal, enjoy, don't think so much about it, just go for the ride. See you next time.